Now, before I pick up with my engagement to Ernie and continue on from there, I have thought of several things I left out from earlier recordings, and I want to go back now and insert those things here. Now, the first of those things occurred back in my high school junior year, in the summer of that junior year in high school, when I remember my friends and I taking a trip to Mineral Wells. Now, we did not get much music on our radios in those days, but we did get a program of what we girls thought was romantic music from Mineral Wells, which came on right after lunch every day. And it was given by the band of Jack Amlong. And we just thought Jack Amlong hung the moon because he was the only band that we knew of that played this lovely romantic music. And that summer, after my junior year in high school, my two best friends, Jean and Ruth, and I listened every day after lunch to Jack Amlong and his band. And we heard that it was broadcast from Mineral Wells. And we thought, oh, how wonderful it would be if we could go there and see that broadcast and see Jack Amlong in person. Well, it just so happened that my mother's sister, Marie, and her husband, Bruce, now these were the parents of Priscilla, but Marie and Bruce had just moved to Mineral Wells, and they were living in a small apartment there. And my mother, bless her heart, wrote to Marie and told her that we were just dying to come over there and hear Jack Amlong in person. And would it be all right with her if we came and spent the night with her? Well, of course, Marie then invited us to come. So Jean and Ruth and I went over there for a weekend. And Ruth's uncle let her take the family car. And we were all just barely 16. And we had all been allowed to start driving when we were 12 years old. But we didn't get our licenses till we were 16. So Ruth had her new license, and her uncle allowed us to take the family car. And we were thrilled to death. And so my parents suggested that we take the back roads to Mineral Wells so there would not be much traffic on that road, and we would be able to get there more safely. So we started out on Friday afternoon, and we did real well until we got somewhere, I guess about halfway there, and the car stopped. Well, we got out and we didn't know what to do about it, but we looked at the engine to see if we could see anything we thought we could do, and we didn't see anything we could do anything about. And we absolutely didn't know what to do. So we decided we would just have to wait till a car came by and get them to stop and help us. But the trouble was, we had taken that back road so there would not be much traffic to bother us, but that meant that nobody was coming by. And we sat there till after dark, waiting for somebody to come by. Nobody came. And so I said, well, we've got to do something. We can't sit here all night. And I could see lights in a farmhouse further down the road, off from the road a ways. And I said, I think we ought to walk over to that farmhouse and ask for help. Well, the other girls did not like that idea at all. They said, what if there are robbers in that house? Or men that would rape us? And they didn't think it was safe to go. But I was determined to get some help. So I said, all right, I'm going to go by myself. So I did. So I took this real small flashlight I had, and I walked through the dark down the road to the entrance to that farmhouse, and then walked back to the farmhouse and knocked on the door. Well, two men came to the door, two big burly men, and my heart started to sink. But I just prayed that I would be able to be strong and that they would not hurt me. And sure enough, they were very kind. And I told them what had happened to us, and they said, all right, we'll come help you. So they put me in their car and drove back down to where our car was. And those two men got out and worked on our car and got it started again. They were as kind and gentle and thoughtful as could be. And afterwards I said, well, what can we pay you? They said, oh, you can't pay us anything. We're just glad we could help you girls. They couldn't have been nicer. So the car was started and we drove on and we got to Mineral Wells and to Marie's apartment about 10 o'clock that night. Of course, she had gotten real worried about what had happened to us. But she didn't call my mother because she didn't want to worry Mother. So anyway, she took us in and she fed us. And then the apartment was so small, but she just made beds for us on the living room floor by spreading out quilts on the floor. And so we were so tired by then that we didn't mind the hard floor. And so we spent the night there. And the next morning, Marie took us down to the Crazy Water Hotel downtown in Mineral Wells. And the lobby was just full of people. They had all come to hear the broadcast of Jack Amlong and his band. Now, I'm not positive that his first name was Jack. I could be getting that wrong, but I know the last name was Amlong. Okay, so there was this huge crowd in the lobby, and we got inside, and they had folding chairs set up in a large room. And fortunately, we were able to get seats right up near the front. And then the band came in. And oh gosh, they looked so great and they were so nice. And they got all set up and they played a little bit in the beginning just to get started. And then the radio broadcast started. Well, that was so exciting because, of course, we had never seen a radio broadcast with a band before. So the announcer did his part and the band played, and it was a 30-minute program. Oh, we loved every minute of it. It was wonderful. Now, afterwards, we wanted to go up and get their autographs, but they left very quickly after that. That was the only disappointment. But we had loved seeing the band and getting to hear them in person. So we were just so excited. And after that, Marie took us around Mineral Wells and showed us all the interesting shops. It was kind of a tourist center. Now, I had remembered back when my father was a little boy, he had gone to Mineral Wells with his mother on the train when she had gone there to take the water, it was called, to drink the water from the Mineral Wells to try to get help with her rheumatism. And lots of people did that back in those days. It was very popular. Well, they didn't have people coming there just to drink the water so much anymore, but they had put up the water in crystals and sold it, called Crazy Water Crystals, which they sold in this hotel. And so many tourists came there that there were little shops with tourist souvenirs all around downtown Mineral Wells. So Marie was very patient with us and took us around to visit all these shops, and we bought some little souvenirs and had such a good time. And I remember she also took us to the Baker Hotel. Now, that had been a luxury hotel where supposedly a number of movie stars used to come just to get away and rest. And it was being remodeled at the time we were there. But we got to go inside and go up on every floor. Every floor had a swimming pool on it. That was what was so unique about the Baker Hotel. That small swimming pool on each floor. Well, we got to walk up and see all those and go up to the top of the hotel and see where they were remodeling it and all. And that was very exciting for us. And then, so after that, we had pretty much seen the points of interest in downtown Mineral Wells. So we went back to Marie's apartment, and she fixed a picnic supper for us and drove us out to a park out on the river out from town. It was a beautiful spot. And we had a picnic out there at night. So that was a lot of fun for us. And then we came back and spent the night on those hard quilts on the floor, but we were so excited that we didn't mind the hard floor. And then the next morning, we had to leave to come back home. And so we thanked Marie and we left and drove back to Cleburne very slowly on that same road and didn't have any more trouble with the car and got safely back home. So that was an exciting weekend for us. And I remember that we heard after that, sometime much later, that Mary Martin, who became a great star on Broadway and in the movies, that she got her start with Jack Amelong's orchestra. So he was pretty famous for that. So we were just thrilled that we had gotten to go there, and Marie had shown us such a good time, and we loved it. So that was our excursion to Mineral Wells. Now, another thing that happened was completely different. Was in my freshman year at Trinity, I had forgotten to tell about. It was soon after the Christmas break, maybe a month or so after I'd gotten back to the college in Waxahachie after the Christmas break. I read in the Cleburne paper. My parents had subscribed to the Cleburne paper for me when I was in college. And I read in the Cleburne paper that my grandmother Abbess had fallen and broken her hip and was not expected to recover. Well, I was terribly upset, because I was so fond of my grandmother. And I called my daddy immediately and chewed him out for not letting me know that grandmother had fallen. And he said, well, he didn't want to interfere with my college work until it was absolutely necessary. And I said, well, I want to come on home now and be with her. And so my mother came over and got me and took me back. And I think grandmother lived for about a week after I got back. So I got to be with her that time. And that meant so much to me to have that last time with her. And I got to read to her. She had had what they called a classical education. She had been sent to what was called a seminary for young girls, which was a special school for teenage girls where they studied the classics. And that had been her education. So she had all these books and of classical poetry and all. And she loved to have them read to her. So I got to read some of them to her. And Aunt Kate, who took care of her, also read to her. And I remember her last day there, she had asked to have Milton's Paradise Regained read to her. So finally the doctor said that he did not expect her to live through the night. And so we all stayed right around her. And when my daddy said, well, it's not going to be long now that she seems to be fading. And we went over, we sat on the bed beside her as she was dying. And she had the sweetest expression on her face. She didn't act like she was in pain at all. She looked almost happy. She just had the sweetest, serene look on her face, like she knew she was on her way to heaven. I'll never forget that. And I was so thankful to get to be there sitting beside her when that happened. I'll never forget it. And then I remember maybe 2 days later, the funeral home in those days followed a custom to bring the casket with the deceased person back home to be with the family for about a week before the burial. And I had read that the reason for that was that many years before that, they were getting ready to bury somebody, and the man sat up in the casket. He wasn't dead. And so it became a custom to have the family be sitting around the casket for about a week watching the body. And they wanted somebody there 24 hours a day. And so close friends and relatives were asked to come and sit for 2 hours at a time. And I remember that my daddy was in charge of getting the people to come and sit. And he had this list that he used. And the family stayed there all the time, except when we went in the other room to eat or to go to take a nap and sleep a little. But I can remember during that time that the week or so, that the casket, the open casket, was sitting in the living room. And the living room was full of people just all around the edge of the room. There were chairs with people sitting in it, and it was that way constantly. And so I remember sitting there as I did most of the time. And Aunt Kate went to the front door when there was a knock on the door. And she opened the door and let in the people there. It was 2 black women. Now, in those days, you did not let black people sit in the living room. If any black people came to visit, they sat on the back porch or in the kitchen. Well, this was 2 young, nicely dressed women who came to the front door. And Aunt Kate, bless her heart, let them in and invited them to sit in the living room. I was so proud of her, I didn't know what to do. And so I went over and took a chair and sat beside them. And they introduced themselves. They were the granddaughters. This is so emotional. They were the granddaughters of the farmer slave that grandmother's father had owned. He had inherited that slave from his father. Jim was his name. And Jim had taken care of grandmother and her mother when the father had to go off and fight in the Civil War. He left Jim to take care of his family. And when the Yankees had come to raid the place, he had hidden grandmother and her mother up in the hayloft and put bale of hay all around them so they couldn't be found. And he had hidden the animals in some brush so they were not found. So the family considered Jim their hero. And, the whole family just loved Jim. And when the slaves were freed, he didn't want to leave. And his owner, my great-grandfather, told him that he needed to leave to have a family of his own. And the family gave him a farm and with a nice house on it, and he moved there and he married and had a family, and these were his granddaughters. And my father had kept up with the family. And when these two young women had gotten ready to go to college, they went to my daddy to ask for loans, and he had loaned them the money to go to college. And they became school teachers. So they were teaching school in Cleburne in the black school. So these granddaughters of my great-grandfather's slave were sitting there with me, the granddaughter of a woman whose father had owned them, their grandfather. And I got to sit there with them and talk with them. And I just loved them. And I felt so honored that they were there, that they had come to pay their respects to grandmother. And knowing that they didn't know for sure how they would be received at the front door. And they were so thankful to have been welcomed so, and I know that some of the people, I could see the expression on some people's faces around the room who were looking shocked. But the family, all of our family, just were so happy that they were there, and we were all so welcoming to them. And that just meant so much to me to get to talk to them. And we talked about their grandfather and what he had meant to the family. And he talked, and they talked about what he used to say about grandmother when she was a little girl and how he had loved taking care of her. So it was all just so touching for me. I just felt it was the most valuable experience I had had in a long time. So I don't remember anything about the funeral or the burial. I just remember that about the visit from those two black women who were granddaughters of Jim, the family slave. So that's something that's just was so moving to me, and I'll never forget it. And so thankful that they came and that Kate was so welcoming to them so that I got to visit with them. So that's what I remember about my grandmother Abba's dying. And I missed about 2 weeks of college there. But I, was able to go back and make it up. And that was really before I got started going with her. And then much later that semester, almost to near the end of the semester, the country club in Waxahachie gave a formal dance for the students at Trinity. Now, dancing was not allowed on the campus, but the country club had this dance every year for the students, and the country club had their clubhouse out in the country, out from Waxahachie. And that occurred near the end of the school year. This was after the group of students had gone to Cleburne and had the supper at my parents' house, and Ernie had started asking me to walk with him real often after that, and we had started getting quite close, and he invited me to go to this dance with him. Well, the only formal I had was the one that my mother had bought for me when I had my private recital as a junior in high school. And I had used that for teas and events like that where I had to wear a long dress. And I had worn it when I was in that parade where I was the rodeo princess. Well, that was going to be the next year. No, I'm getting mixed up. I'm getting my days mixed up. This was after that I'd been the princess of the Lions Club, but I had worn this dress for that event too. So I wore it to this dance, and Ernie told me right off the bat that it looked like a little girl's dress and I needed something more grown-up looking. And he was right. But formals were expensive in those days. And even though my family was comfortably fixed, we were frugal with buying clothes, and I just didn't want to buy another formal because they were so expensive. So anyway, I went in this little girl formal that I'd been wearing for 2 years for these various events. And also, I didn't know how to dance. The only other dance I'd ever been to was that when I went to that football game in Austin, and Virginia Warren had her nephew take me to the dance after that football game, and I had worn this dress then, but at that dance, that boy and I, neither one of us really knew how to dance. We had tried a little bit, but not much. So, this time, when I was a freshman in Trinity, near the end of the first semester, or first year, Ernie took me to this dance, and he taught me how to dance. He was so patient with me, and he taught me how enough to get by on, and we both had a good time. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Now, This reminds me of something else I forgot. Going back when I was a senior in high school, the year before this, there was talk about having a prom for the first time. They had never had a prom in Cleveland because it was so conservative and so many people didn't believe in dancing. But some of the parents wanted the girls to get to have a prom, and so they were pushing for it. And there was all this talk in the community about whether or not the school should have a prom for the students. And I remember my daddy was president of the Businessmen's Evangelistic League. Now, their purpose was to go to the jail every Sunday afternoon and hold a religious service for the prisoners. That's what they did. And there was, as a part of that group, there was a minister of a very conservative, extremely conservative church. And he came to my daddy and he said, there's all this talk about having a prom for the seniors. And he said, you're not going to let your daughter go, are you? He said, I'm not going to let my son go. Now, his son was a real cute, popular boy and was president of our class. But he said, I'm not letting my son go to any prom. And I don't expect you to let your daughter to go. Well, my daddy, bless his heart, said, well, it's going to be up to Margaret what she thinks she ought to do. Oh, I appreciate that so much. Well, actually, my boyfriend, Morris Bratton, as I've mentioned before, was from such a conservative family that they did not allow dancing. So I knew he would not be taking me to the dance. And I didn't want to go with anybody else. And I really didn't care anything about going to the dance then. And so it didn't bother me at all that I didn't get to go. And there was so much opposition to it that they ended up just having a small dance for a few people. And it wasn't like a big prom at all. And that's all there was to it. Now, there's one other thing I remember that I had left out. And that was about, well, I think I need to take a sip of water before I go on. This memory occurred when Trinity had moved to San Antonio. And at the beginning of that school year, when for the first 6 weeks, Ernie's friend Ed Polk was there with his car and was driving us places so I could see all of San Antonio. And I was having such a great time with those two guys. Well, what I had forgotten to say was that Ed also took me to his mother's home, where his mother and his two younger sisters lived. And his mother, Viva Polk, had already been sort of like a mother to Ernie, and Ernie had spent a lot of time in their home. She just greeted me with open arms and just accepted me completely and was just wonderful to me. And she had me to eat supper at their home many times. She invited me many times during that year to come there for supper. Now, she was the secretary of the Madison Square Presbyterian Church. This was the main Presbyterian church in our branch of Presbyterians in San Antonio. And somebody told me she actually ran that church because she just seemed to keep everything going. She was just a wonderful person. And so she made sure that Ed and Ernie came to Sunday school and church every Sunday. And so they started taking me. And the preacher's wife taught the class for the young people. And so that was the Sunday school class we went to. And then we went to the church service. And the church was so happy to have Trinity there and so welcoming to Trinity students. And they offered what they called a student membership, where you could remain a member of your home church, but still be a partial member of the Madison Square Church. A student member was called of the Madison Square Church. So I joined that as a student member, and I went to Sunday school and church there every Sunday, even after Ed and Polk could no longer go, when they were either Polk was transferred out and Ernie was working on Sunday and couldn't go. Whether they could go or not, I went there every Sunday that year and the next year that I was in San Antonio. So that became my second church home. And I loved that church. So I just wanted to add that I had forgotten. So those were things that I had left out before. And I may think of something else later to add. But that's all I can remember right now that I've left out. So I'd like to go now to where I left off, where Ernie had just given me my ring behind the Christmas tree. And I was just thrilled to death. I didn't even notice that it was a very small diamond in my ring. It was a diamond ring, and I was absolutely thrilled. And the fact, beyond the ring itself, the most important thing was I was thrilled to be officially engaged to Ernest Dimon. And I remember when I got home, went on home after that for the Christmas holidays, I went back to the high school to show off my ring. Here it had been 2 years since I had graduated, but I went back and went around to see all my teachers and showed them my engagement ring because I was so proud. And the next thing I remember, that year, that first year in San Antonio, at spring break, Ernie went home with me for that spring break. The whole week, I was thrilled to death that he was able to take off work and go home with me so that I could show him off, show off the boy that I was going to marry. And I introduced him to all my relatives, and that was such a thrill. And then I took him around to see the places that I had enjoyed the most growing up. And of course, I took him down to our pasture where we kept our horses. And I remember taking him to Glen Rose and taking him into the bank and introducing him to the banker there, the banker who raised the wonderful Palomino horses. And then we went down to see the dinosaur tracks in the river. And then I asked him to go with me out to Camp Tres Rios, which was out from town a ways on the east side of Glen Rose. And we drove into Camp Tres Rios, and we stopped. Ernie was driving, and he stopped at the caretaker's cabin. He was feeling a little uncomfortable about us just going in there. And he told the caretaker that I had gone to camp there and I just wanted to look around a little bit. The caretaker said, "That's fine." He said, "Many girls do that, come back and walk around again." And he said she can take her time, spend as much time as she wants to. So Ernie walked around with me all over that campus, all over the grounds, and into the buildings. And I found myself crying most of the way. Tears were just rolling down my cheeks nearly the whole time because I was so touched to be back there. And I had had so many meaningful experiences at that camp. So that was a very special time for me. Another day, I took him down to the Smith's home in Rio Vista. And I took my 22 with us. And the Smiths were not at home, but their lead foreman knew me, and he let us go into the the field, the pecan orchard, where this wonderful target was with the deer cut out of metal and that we let run across a gully and used to shoot at. And so we went down there and I showed that target to Ernie, and he and I had a lot of fun there for several hours shooting at that target. That was such fun. So those are just the special things I remember doing with him. But that whole week was just full of me showing off Ernie and showing him what it meant so much to me in Cleburne. And then, right at the end of the week, we were invited by the new minister at the church, our family's church in Cleburne. The new minister invited Ernie and I to come over one evening for ice cream. And the minister who had been there all my life until I went to college, Dr. Arnold, had moved on to Corsicana. And this new minister, I really had not had a chance to get acquainted with, Carter McCamey. But I thought that was so nice of him to invite us over. And my daddy had told him that I was engaged to this boy who was going to get ready to go to seminary to become a minister. So Carter invited us over, and he and his wife had made a freezer full of ice cream, and we sat out in their backyard and ate ice cream. Oh, it was so good, and we had such a good visit. And most of the time, Carter was telling about the good times that he had in seminary. And he had gone to seminary at the San Francisco Theological Seminary. He was the first boy from Texas who went to that school, and there had just been 2 others from Texas since then. All of the other ministerial students from Texas went to the seminary in Chicago, and Ernie had just felt that he had to go to Chicago, that was the only option. But he really didn't much like the idea of living in that big city. And Carter told him about how he had loved this seminary in Marin County across the bay from San Francisco. And he convinced Ernie and I both that night that that's where Ernie ought to go to seminary, that he ought to change his plans and go to seminary in California. And this was so exciting for both of us. And we were thrilled at the prospect of going out there. And I remember when we got back to Trinity after that week in Cleburne, Ernie was checking to see exactly when he could graduate. Now, he had to miss a semester of school because he had run out of money. And so he had to find out exactly when he would have enough credits to graduate. And he found that at the end of this school year, he would just need 2 1 semester hours of credits. In other words, 2 half courses, and would be able to finish his credits for graduation the middle of the summer, and then could go on to seminary after that. So that was exciting to know. And his cousins gave him an old car. They had bought a new car, and they had this real old car that was in very bad shape. And they gave it to Ernie, and he was determined to fix it up and drive it to California. Because he had heard that you really needed to have your own car in seminary to drive out to a student church. So Ernie decided that he needed to fix up that old car so he could drive it to California and then start to seminary. And so at the end of that school year, by then, he was beginning to try to talk me into marrying him then, so that I could go to seminary with him. And I had promised my parents that I would finish college before I got married. And I felt drawn between them and between Ernie. And it was just really hard for a while. And Ernie just kept begging me to come on and go out with him that summer. And be able to start with him to seminary. And my parents were expecting me to finish college. And I really had 2 full years ahead of me. So I told him that I had to fulfill my promise to my parents. And I just could not disappoint them after all they had done for me. And that I could not go out with him that summer. But instead, what I would do was to get busy and manage to graduate in 3 years, so I would just have 1 more year of college and could marry him after his first year in seminary. So then we would have the last 2 years together out there. Well, I didn't know whether he was going to accept that or not, and I felt really worried for a while that I thought I don't want to lose Ernie. I can't lose Ernie, but I can't give up my promise to my parents. And I was just torn between the two, and I just kept praying that Ernie would agree to let me stay and finish in 3 years and then marry him. And sure enough, he did agree to it finally. And so that was my plan. So I got very busy at the end of that first year. I mean, yeah, it was the end of my first year in San Antonio. It was the end of my second year at Trinity. And I got busy to figure out how I could finish in another year. And I studied the book of majors and telling what was required for each major. And I found that there was one major called social sciences, that a number of the courses I had already taken would be counted toward that degree. And if I doubled up and took as much as I possibly could, and also took some courses by correspondence, then I could finish at the end of the next year. So that's what I did. So I got busy and started planning how I could do that, and plan to schedule as many classes as possible the next year, and also arrange to take some courses by correspondence. And the only way that you could take things by correspondence at that time was through A&M. So I wrote to A&M for that catalog and figured out what I could take from there that would count toward this degree. Now, this social sciences degree used what I'd already taken in religion and comparative religions and philosophy and sociology. 2 courses in sociology. I'm not sure what else. I know I had to take a course in economics, in ethics, and history, and I don't know what else, but it was just a variety of things that were all fit under this subject of social sciences. And so I had it planned. So starting that summer, now this was near the end of the spring semester of my second year at Trinity. And so that was when I was planning all this. And so I knew that summer I had to take as much as I possibly could. So I got busy and planned that, what I could do for the summer. And then I remember that Ernie found that in order to graduate, he had to take 2 half years, and he could graduate he could finish his required courses at the middle of the summer. They didn't have a commencement in the summer, so he would be considered graduating at the time that I wanted to graduate. But he would finish his classwork the middle of the summer, and I would have to stay on and go to both semesters of the summer and all of the next years, fall and spring. So that was the plan. And Ernie had this car his cousins had given him. It was in real bad shape. And he arranged with somebody who lived about a block from the school campus to use that yard by their garage to work on his car. And every day when he got off work, he would come there and work on that old car. And when I got out of class, I would come over and join him. Now, I didn't know a thing about helping the motor, working with the motor. Of course, he did all that by himself. But when it came to painting the car and reupholstering it, I helped with that all the way. Now, at that time, these old cars had upholstery all over the doors and just over most of the inside of the car. And Ernie was able to find a place where he could order upholstery material for the car. And so after he reworked the engine and painted the outside, he and I together reupholstered the inside. And that was hard because the doors had several knobs on them that you had to go around when you were working the upholstery. Anyway, we got that whole car reupholstered. And I must admit, it looked really good. When we finished, we were so proud of it. And then we painted what needed to be painted on the inside and had painted all of the outside. So we had completely reworked the car. Of course, Ernie had done most of it. So we got that done right at the time that that first semester of summer school ended. We got the car finished right at that time. So he was ready to take out, but he needed new tires. And he could not find the right size tires in San Antonio. Tires were very hard to find during the war. And so we told my daddy, and bless his heart, I think he could find anything. And he found the tires that Ernie needed in Cleburne. So Ernie just had to drive the old car on the old tires up to Cleburne to get the new tires, and then he could take out for California. Well, I had 3 days off before the new semester of summer school started. And so I wanted to go to Cleburne with him. And he finished things up late in the afternoon, really in the early evening. And so we were ready to take out for Cleburne early that evening. And when I told the house mother I was checking out of the dorm to do that, well, she did not approve at all. She said it wasn't right for me to be going off with a boy during the night because we could not get to Cleburne before the middle of the night. and that was not right for us to be out the middle of the night together. And I told her I had to go, and she called my parents and told them that I was wanting to go, and she knew we wouldn't get there until the middle of the night, and she was trying to stop me. And bless my parents' heart again. They said, well, we trust Margaret to do what's right. God love them. And so she let me go then. And Ernie and I started out. Well, I don't know how long it took before the first tire gave out. But one tire gave out, and we just had to ride on the rim, just on the wheel. So that meant, of course, we had to go real slow. So we drove along. After a while, another tire gave out. Then a little later, another one. By the time we got to Hillsboro, all of the tires had given out, and we were on the rims for all the wheels. Well, that made it very hard to drive, of course. So we drove very slowly back. And I think we got to Cleburne about 6 o'clock in the morning after driving all night. We had stopped along the way and rested. We would stop and just sit out beside the road and rest for a while. And then we would pick up and go on. Well, so about 6 o'clock, we pulled in to my parents' house, stopped in front of the house, and looked, and right behind us was a highway patrol car. And the highway patrolman came over and said, "You're under arrest." Ernie said, "What?" He said, "We had just blacktopped that road from Hillsboro to Cleburne, and you absolutely ruined it by driving on it on the rim on those wheels." Well, he was going to arrest Ernie and also make him pay a big fine. Well, we didn't know what to do, and we were just standing there trying to talk our way out of it, and my father heard us, woke up and came out, and he asked what was wrong, and the highway patrolman explained to him. And then Daddy did his best. He said that Ernie was a ministerial student, and he was trying to go to seminary to become a minister so he could be a chaplain to the armed forces. And that he had to get to California in that car, and that he couldn't find the tires anywhere else, and he had found some in Cleburne. So he had to come to Cleburne to get the tires, and the old tires had just given out along the way. Well, my daddy was so good at that he convinced the highway patrolman to back down and not give Ernie a fine and not arrest him. So he drove off. He wasn't happy, but he didn't punish Ernie. So then we went in and my parents fixed breakfast for us, and then Daddy got the new tires for Ernie. And then Ernie was ready to take out. He didn't want to waste any more time. And so he left to head on to California. And I had to go back to Trinity to get there in time for that second semester of summer school. And to carry this real heavy load in order to graduate in 3 years. So we each left to go our separate ways, and I didn't see Ernie again till just before we got married. And I went back to school, and that rest of that summer school, I was working in the library at night. Now, I had started working in the library at the beginning of that year because that was the only place that I could work and still go to school, get my courses in. And I wanted to work to earn some money to buy a nice gift for Ernie, that not with my daddy's money, but with money I had earned myself. And so that's why I was working in the library. And I did earn enough to buy that nice pocket watch. Ernie had been wanting a pocket watch. And so I earned enough to buy a real nice Hamilton watch for him. And I was happy with that. And so the rest of that summer I worked at the library. And I remember one day this was still in that summer, I got a phone call from the sociology professor, Dr. Clark. Now, I had loved the sociology course book. I'd loved the subject, but I thought the teacher was a little weird. But I had taken 2 courses in sociology that semester, or that year. So Dr. Clark called me and told me that he was down at the St. Anthony Hotel, and he had a room there, and he wanted me to come down to his room and wanted to see me there. I thought, oh, good Lord. I thought, he's more weird than I thought. And of course I turned him down. And then a few days later, another girl came to me and told me that he had called her. And then a few more days, and a third girl came to me and said he had called her. Of course, they had both turned him down. And I thought then, something's got to be done about this. I thought, what if an innocent little freshman does go down there to meet with him and he rapes her? And I've got to do something to stop him. But I didn't know what to do. I felt uncomfortable about doing it. I normally would have gone to Dean Schwab with problems, but I didn't feel comfortable going to him with this. And there was a woman who was at Trinity just for a year to teach some special course. And she had been spending a lot of time at night at the library and would talk to me, and we had gotten pretty well acquainted, and I really liked her. And she had told me that her husband was head of the sociology department at the University of Colorado. And she was missing him so much. That's why she spent so much time in the library at night. So I decided I would tell her about this and ask her what we ought to do. So I told her about all these phone calls. And I said, I had loved the sociology book and the course, and I was afraid that he had mistaken my interest in the course for interest in him. But then he called these other two girls too. So anyway, I said, what can we do? She said, I don't know. But she said, I will tell my husband and he'll know what to do. Well, about 2 weeks later, she came to me and said, Dr. Clark will not be coming back to Trinity this fall. And he will not be teaching sociology in any university in the United States from now on. Whew. Wow. I thought how powerful her husband was. But I was so thankful, so relieved he was going to be gone. But then I got to worrying. I had played a big part in causing 2 professors that year to lose their jobs. The speech teacher who wanted to put on the play, and this sociology teacher who kept calling girls to come down to the hotel. And I had a part in both of them being fired, and I was feeling guilty about that. But yet I felt like I had done the right thing. It was just hard to accept the results. That's the end of that story. And I think I need to take a little break now. Now I believe I can pick up and add a little bit more. I'm remembering something I left out again. Now, this is something that happened earlier in the year of that first year I was at Trinity in San Antonio. And I was co-president of the YWYMCA on the campus. And we were working so hard to try to develop a Christian atmosphere like we had had in Waxahachie. And I remember getting a phone call from the downtown YWCA saying that they had a woman visiting there who was a worldwide representative of the YWCA who traveled around the world representing the organization. And she would be available to speak at Trinity if we wanted to have her. Well, of course, I wanted to have her. And so I checked with my co-president and we got it scheduled for her to speak in the campus auditorium. And we made posters and put them up all around the campus advertising her speech. And I got the idea that it would be nice if we could have her spend a little time just with the girls that afternoon before her speech. And we could have a little afternoon tea for her. And fortunately, in our dormitory, there was a little dining room with everything you needed to have an afternoon tea. And so I got a committee together and we planned it and we made posters to advertise it and we got the refreshments for the afternoon tea, got it all planned. And I had called the Y and told them and told them when we were having it and all. And just before time for the tea to start, our club sponsor, who was the wife of Dean Schwab, Mrs. Schwab, who was a German professor at the college, she came over just to check on our preparations for the tea. And she checked everything, said it all looked good and was ready to go. And then she saw a folder lying there with a picture of our honored guest on it, and saw that the woman was black. Well, she just had a fit. I was shocked that she was so prejudiced, but she said, "We're not going to allow a black woman in this dormitory. You're going to have to cancel the tea. She is not coming. We are not letting her in." Well, I was so upset. But Miss Schwab stormed out. Well, I just went right over to her husband, whom I had gotten to know so well because he, as I think I've said before, he used to preach sometimes at our church in Cleveland. So I felt like I knew him real well. And I went over and I said, "You have got to do something with your wife. She's trying to make us cancel our tea. And we just can't do that." And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything with her. You're just going to have to put up with it." Oh, I was so upset. And I just felt I'd lost all my respect for Dean Schwab as well as his wife. And she was so adamant that I knew there wasn't anything to do but to cancel it. So I went back and told the other girls, and we had to go out and write cancel on all the posters advertising the tea. And I said, well, at least we could take her out to eat. And I thought it would be nice to take her to a Mexican restaurant since San Antonio is so unique for that. And I knew I had occasionally seen another black in a restaurant in San Antonio because it was so cosmopolitan since it had all these army bases in there. And so I called the Y back and said we had to have a change in plans. Well, I'm sure that they guessed what had happened, but I said, that we wanted, instead of the tea, we wanted to take the woman out to eat to a Mexican restaurant. I forgot to say before that, I called La Fonda, which was a real nice Mexican restaurant. And I told La Fonda that I wanted to bring 8 people, and one of them was black. And I said, "Will you seat us?" And they said yes, they would. So, so then that's when I called back then and said that we wanted to take her out to eat instead of having the tea, and that we would pick her up in a taxi at a certain time. Well, our committee got busy, and we didn't have a lot of money for the whole group, and so we rode the bus down to town to just a few blocks from the Y, and then got off the bus and called a taxi there. And then took the taxi over to the Y to pick up this woman and then take her on to La Fonda in the taxi. And sure enough, they did seat us. They put us back in a corner where we couldn't be seen by the others, but at least they seated us and served us. And she, acted like she really enjoyed it. And we all had a good time just visiting with her. She was a really lovely person. And then we took her back to the college, and she got ready for her speech, and she gave a real good speech, and there was a good crowd there of students. And I was so proud of that. And they all seemed to enjoy it, so it was a really good thing after all. But I never got over being upset at Dean Schwab and his wife. Excuse me, I have to get something to drink. Okay, Now I will pick up with where I left off with the end of the summer semester after my first year in San Antonio, my second year at Trinity. So we ended that summer semester and started the fall semester then. And I was carrying such a heavy workload that fall that I really was not able to do a lot of other work on the campus. But I do remember the main thing that I got to do was to get the school to have a religious emphasis week. We had had one of those in Waxahachie, and it had been so effective with the minister coming in and speaking twice a day and being available in between times for conferences with students. And so I did go to Dean Schwab for that, and he agreed to that and helped us convince the president to have this religious emphasis week. And I suggested that we invite Hoyt Bowles as the speaker, and they agreed and contacted him. And so later in the school year, we did get to have that religious emphasis week, and it was very effective, and I was so happy we'd gotten to do that. So that was my main accomplishment that year. But then something sort of interesting and unexpected. I got a phone call from Dean Davis. Now, Dean Davis, the Dean of Women, had been in Waxahachie and had made the move, and she was living in an apartment in our dormitory down on the first floor in a separate wing. It was a U-shaped building, and she had one wing as her apartment on the ground floor. And she was an interesting person. I had really not gotten acquainted with her at all when we were in Waxahachie. I had just seen her a few times and had met her, and that was all. And she wore all black and dresses down below the usual length, and old-fashioned lace-up shoes, and no makeup, very strict hairstyle, and just like something out of the past, and was known to be extremely strict, and all the girls who had gotten in trouble were scared to death of her. And I just had not had a chance to even talk to her. And then on the second year, when she had come on to San Antonio, she called me one day and shocked me just to call me and say, "This is Dean Davis." And she said, she wanted to talk to me about doing a job for her. And she asked me to come to her apartment to talk to her. So I went down there, and she was just as nice and just lovely to me. And she said that she had heard such good things about me, and that she knew that I was very trustworthy, and that she was having a close friend visit her who had a little 4-year-old boy, and she would like for me to babysit that little boy when she went out for the evening with her friend. Well, I was so honored that she even called me and spoke to me like that, and because I had heard such frightening things about her. And I just felt very honored that she asked me, of all the girls in that dormitory, she had chosen me to come and do the babysitting for her friend's little boy. So, of course, I agreed to do it. And I went down on the appointed day at that time she had asked. And I could not believe what I saw. Dean Davis was getting dressed to go out for the evening. I don't know where she and her young lady friend were going, but she was getting all dressed up. She was still dressed in black, but it was a dressy dress and it was the right length. She had on nice shoes, pretty shoes. She had her hair fixed. She had been to the beauty shop. And she was putting on makeup when I got there. I couldn't believe this was Dean Davis. She was like a different person. And so, and she didn't seem bothered at all that I saw her bustling around trying to get ready and getting her makeup on and everything. And she introduced me to her friend and to the little boy, and of course he was a darling little boy, and he had some books he wanted me to read to him. And they gave me instructions, about the snack I should give him and the how long I should read to him and when I should turn out the light and help him to settle down to go to sleep and so forth. All these instructions they gave me. And they were just, both of the women just bustling around, getting ready like they were going to a very important party. And that may have been where they were going. I have no idea where they were going. But anyway, Dean Davis was a different person. And I enjoyed seeing her make this change. And it didn't seem to bother her that I saw her make such a complete change. So she got all ready and they left. And I had a really good time with the little boy, and he was so well behaved, and I enjoyed babysitting him and taking care of him and finally getting him to bed and so forth. And they had said that they wouldn't be back till about midnight. And so sure enough, about midnight, they got back. And they just looked so happy. And I had never seen Dean Davis look so happy and so relaxed. And they just seemed so happy with the way I'd taken care of the little boy and paid me very nicely, and uh, and so I went on back to my room, and I was just thrilled that it happened. And then it happened again, two more times that school year, during the year, when her friend came and she went out with her friend and they asked me to come babysit. And I loved it. And I loved getting to know Dean Davis in a different way. And I just loved getting to know her that way. So that was the story of that. And so let me see. There was Religious Emphasis Week and Dean Davis, and those were the two main things. First, and then there was one other thing that was special. Well, first I should say, I had to take the exams for the correspondence courses I was taking from A&M. I had to take those exams in Cleburne in the office of the county judge. Those were the instructions I got. So when I went home for the Christmas holidays, I had to do that. And those were hard courses anyway. They're courses in philosophy. And they were hard courses for me. But I had to go down to the courthouse, and I was very nervous as I went to the county judge's office. And his secretary took me into a little private room and gave me the exam papers, and I had to sit there and take the exam. So that happened to that, and then during the spring break, I had to do it again for another course from A&M. That time, I was not so nervous since I'd had experience with it once. But anyway, so I had those two times with that exam. I had 3 experiences that year babysitting for Dean Davis and feeling like I got to know her better each time and was loving her more each time. And then one other experience, they decided that Trinity should have a dance now. In San Antonio, they could have a dance. And so they were going to have a dance on the campus for Valentine's. And they had a committee of faculty and students to plan, and they decided to have a queen selected and have some princesses elected. Excuse me. And so they nominated people, about 5 people for each position. I think there were 4 princesses and then the queen. And I was shocked when I was nominated for the most intelligent princess, because I knew that there were other girls on that campus that were more intelligent than I was. And I was surprised. But I realized it was just because I was more well known as working with this Y group and trying to get the Christian atmosphere on the campus. No, I had just become more well known, and then also working in the library. So all those things had helped me to become more well known, and so I figured that's why I was one of those nominated as the most intelligent. And so people on the campus were supposed to vote and choose the person to represent each of those things, each of those positions, and they were to be announced at the dance, and the princesses and the queen would all be crowned at the dance. Well, I didn't want to go to the dance because Ernie, wasn't there, and I didn't want to go with anyone else or be there with anyone else, so I didn't plan to even go to the dance. And the morning of the dance, a committee came to me and told me that I had been chosen as the most intelligent princess. Well, I was absolutely shocked because I knew of those 6 people nominated that there were some on that list that were much more intelligent than I was. But I guess it was because I worked in the library and had been more involved with everything that I was more well known. So anyway, they said it was formal, and I had to come in a formal dress and be there at a certain time to be presented as a princess. And so I got out my trusty formal, the same one I'd had since I was a junior in high school. That same old dress, and put it, got it ready to put on, and worked on getting my hair to looking better. And so then I got dressed and went over there, and they had the crown, and then they had presented each of the princesses, and they had thrones for each one of us, and a larger throne for the queen, and the one who was elected queen. And the one elected queen, was a real pretty girl, and I felt that was accurate, that electing her as queen, but I didn't think that they were right to choose me as the most intelligent princess. But that's what they had chosen, so I went along with it reluctantly, so I went over there. Well, just before I went over to the dance, one of the women who had been nominated as the most intelligent, and one who I knew was more intelligent than I was, she came down to me and she said, "Well, are we just supposed to go over there and see who they've elected?" And I had to tell her, that they had come and told me that I was elected, and I knew she was more intelligent, but they just knew me better, and so they had elected me. And she was mad. She she felt that she was more intelligent, which she was, and she stormed out of my room. She just was furious that she had not, that I had been elected and she hadn't. And she was never friendly to me after that. So anyway, I was sorry about that. But I had to go on and go. They were counting on me. So I went over there and I participated in their pageant. And I was presented as the most intelligent princess. And it was a nice little pageant. And then when it was over, I left. And I just didn't want to stay any longer since Ernie wasn't there. And I came back home and took off my formal and went to bed. So that was that. And I remember going home on spring break and having to go to the courthouse and take another one of those exams for my extension course from A&M. But I honestly don't remember anything else until shortly before the end of the school year. And I went over to the registrar then and told him that I had figured out my credits, and it looked to me like at the end of that semester I would have enough credits to graduate. And he was surprised, but he checked, and he checked over everything that I had, and he said, well, I have to admit you have all the credits, so you will get to graduate now. So that was near the end of the school year that I found out for sure that I was going to get to graduate. And so my parents came down for the commencement and to take me back home. And we had such a small class, and because of the war, and so the commencement was just a small event. But they had it in a downtown auditorium, and I remember when I saw the program, the printed programs that they were giving out that had the name of all the graduates on it. After my name, it said cum laude, and that was the first I knew that I was graduating with honors. And I frankly was surprised, since I had such a heavy load and all, and I really had not gotten all my grades, so I was surprised that I graduated with honors, but I did. And I thought, well, at least that'll make my parents happy when they see that in the program. And of course it did. And so the other thing I remember about the commencement program was I remember seeing my parents sitting out there and looking very happy, and I was so thankful then so proud and so thankful that I had been able to stay in school and finish my degree like I had promised my parents I would do. And then I saw also that Viva Polk had come. Ed Polk's mother had come to the commencement, and I thought that was so sweet of her to come. And so so that was the commencement, and after that, school was over and I was a graduate. So I went back home, and I remember that the next day after I got home, I was looking forward to sleeping late that next morning. And my daddy came in and woke me up early. And I thought, why in the world is he waking me up so early? You know, I was almost angry. And he said, I'm waking you up because the president has announced the invasion of France has started, and they're asking everyone to pray. And he was waking me up to pray. So, of course, I was glad he had waked me, and I was glad that I could pray for the success of the invasion. Um,